Thanks for the intro music. So we are actually shifting gears here. I'm going to talk about devices now. It's been a great session talking about non-device products, but at Envision, we're developing a device that we think is going to change the entire way that we do eye care. This is an AI-based machine learning instrument that is meant to revolutionize the care of the patient in the pre-area before the delivery of therapies. So as any clinician knows, the cost of running a clinic is exorbitant, and it's mainly driven by our labor requirements. Globally, we spend about $8 billion a year around the world just on labor for eye care. So in the US, it's $4 billion. And if you come to our clinics, it's full of people and devices. And after the pandemic, good staff are increasingly hard to find. It's been very difficult to train and retain good employees. It was difficult before the pandemic, but more so after the Great Resignation. All these people and devices makes our clinics inefficient, and that makes it difficult for us to deliver therapies and to take care of patients. And the results of the tests that we do are highly variable. These are human beings that are doing it, often poorly trained people in doing these tests, and so we get results that we can't always trust. This makes it very difficult for us to make clinical decisions, especially at the early point in the stage of disease management. Our clinics are full of single-function devices, and this archaic paradigm that we use makes it difficult for us to integrate new information. Lots of new discoveries are coming out, and in the era of AI and machine learning, we expect more and more discoveries to impact clinical care, but it's very difficult to change our processes because they're so driven by human beings and by existing devices. Another problem we have is we can't share data properly. Everyone in this room who's been to a healthcare provider knows the pain of trying to share records, and that impairs our ability to take care of patients, and ultimately our patients suffer, not just by the inability to get the care that they need, but by the long wait times, the uncertainty about the exams that they're receiving, and it makes it dissatisfying for patients and for providers. The solution that we think to this problem is automation. Automation has revolutionized a lot of industries, but in our case, removing people from this process can be helpful in many ways. It saves on our labor and device costs. It solves the issue about trying to hire good staff. It increases our efficiency so we can take care of more patients and deliver more therapies. And very importantly, it standardizes the eye exam. Talked about this for years now, and it's still a goal that I think is worth achieving, which is I want the eye exam in San Diego to be the same eye exam that's done in New York City or in London. And that would be wonderful for our field, but it's something that's been elusive because we all do eye exams differently. An automated instrument, by its very nature, does the exam the same way every time, no matter where it is in the world. So a multifunctional instrument can save on space, cost, and time. Using our instruments already driven by AI, and using AI both to drive the decisions the instrument makes and to drive new discoveries is going to rocket us forward in terms of the diseases that we can detect and diagnose. If you can do it 10 feet away, you can do it 100 miles away. So this enables remote eye care in a way that we've never been able to do it. And again, ultimately, the major benefactor of this will be the patient. Shorter visits, more reliable results, more engagement in the process, and more accessibility to their data. So we call this OCT Plus. This is a patient-operated machine. It's a first of its kind, whole-eye binocular OCT. Plus, it does the functional tests that doctors need to evaluate a patient. So the standard 92014 comprehensive exam is shown here. This is easy to complete on an instrument like ours, but it can be programmed to do almost anything, be it subjective refraction, fixation, stability testing, even exophthalmometry. The ancillary tests that we still rely on would be done in this instrument as well, OCT of the whole eye, along with perimetry, biometry, microperimetry. And I think clinical trials could be revolutionized by an instrument like this because, again, it's done the same way every time in every clinical trials site, and that clinical trials protocol can be ported directly to clinical practice. It's a diagnostically driven device, so if you have a dry AMD patient and you want to manage them the same way every time you see them, this instrument can do that very thing based on the diagnosis. So we think that OCT Plus has the ability to make our management of diseases more streamlined, but also to detect diseases earlier. And this gives you an example. You probably can't read this, but this is the output from our device, which is a lab report. People are very familiar with blood tests, reading their own blood tests. In our device, a measurement that's out of range is dissociated from the regular column. And you can see that most of these measurements here are normal. This patient is someone you wouldn't have to worry too much about. But across the room, you can tell that this patient's right eye is abnormal. There aren't eye exam notes right now that allow you to make this kind of quick assessment for a patient. On top of all those numbers that we get, we have whole eye OCT that I believe is going to replace the slit lamp. This is a better exam, it's a long-lasting exam, and I think it can and should replace the slit lamp biomicroscopy exam. To give you an example of the measurements we make, a standard exam gives these 5 very qualitative subjective measurements. Our instrument in the same amount of time makes 73 quantitative objective measurements. 10 times as much data in the same amount of time, 500,000 quantitative measurements per year from every instrument. This is going to drive AI. And if you think that these measurements may be unnecessary, let me just tell you about one measurement that we found that was compelling. This is measuring the pupils during our exam. We can detect autonomic neuropathy from a regular pupillary exam, and diabetic autonomic neuropathy is a diagnosis that we currently can't make because we don't have the tools to do it. This plot shows how non-proliferative and proliferative diabetics have increasing autonomic neuropathy that could be intervened upon if we caught it in time. This doesn't just apply to diabetic disease. This shows an example of macular degeneration having autonomic neuropathy associated with it, and branch retinal vein occlusions, autoimmune disease, even thyroid disease. So there's a lot of potential in the data that we don't get right now. We've been doing this for 10 years. We've built lots of prototypes now. We have great intellectual property protection in this area for doing OCT plus any other functional test. And we really stand apart in the field where we are multifunctional, clinical grade quality data, not a VR headset that makes tests that may or may not be clinical grade. We're doing OCT of the whole eye, and we're doing tests that clinicians want and need. So hopefully we're going to get to FDA. We have a great team. We're raising money to get through our FDA process with a hope that once we get this device to market, it's going to change the way that we examine the eye, lower the cost, and improve the quality of what we do in eye care. Thank you.